So I have instructions to make it short. That there's a meeting that's coming. And I intend to honor my commitment. I just don't know where to start. But we'll get her done. On my desk at home sits my Apple computer, my printer, the usual stapler and tape dispenser, silver cup with my pens in it, some stamps, my lamp, and a stack of books. But there also there's also a collection of quirky, I love that word, quirky little things that sit on my desk because they remind me of all of the creativity that's in this world, and it sparks a certain curiosity and creativity in me. There's also a design that sits there, one of my inventions. I was going to tell you about my first invention, but I'll save that for another day. Maybe it's the one I'm most proud of, Bill, but it saves kids from smashing their fingers in a door. But there's this design that sits on my desk, and it has what's called a teleidoscope in it. Now, a teleidoscope is different from a kaleidoscope in that a teleidoscope has a clear crystal ball on the end and 3 different mirrors so that whatever you look at, it splits that image. If it were this photo, I'd have about 100 of those photos. If it was Chris Moore, I don't know what I would do. I would start singing. But a kaleidoscope, as you all know, is there anybody that did not grow up playing with a kaleidoscope? I did not think so. But a kaleidoscope has this, as you know, has a hole in this end and a bunch of cut glass on the other. And if you look up at the light, it really splits into a lot of fun, colorful shapes and sizes. And what this does is it reminds me of the church. It reminds me of how many different kinds of churches there are and how they can address a whole myriad of liturgies and styles and emphases in the Christian church. It can be a wonderful thing. But if you look, you can also see a bunch of big dark spots that you wish weren't there because you know that they have created so much hurt and pain for people. Some of you have come out of churches like that. And that breaks my heart more than you'll ever know. And I know that it breaks God's heart too. The last church I was serving before I came here, I said the benediction, hopped in the car, and headed south. That was in Green Bay. And if you're wondering, yes, they've already had snow. Yes, lots of snow. But I remember the day when I was there, and I just loved kids and had a lot of the cutest kids in the world. And one of my little guys came up to me one day and he said, "Pastor Jim?" And I said, "Yes." He said, which church does God go to? And I said, all of them. All of them. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, God's Spirit is active in the churches. Now we know that because God's Spirit is there, not all is well, because we're there too. I always said the church would be just fine if it wasn't for the people. But I've come to understand that I want to amend that and say the minister and the people, because that's where things get rough. Anyway, I've come to understand that churches are not perfect. No, not by a long shot. And sometimes they create lots of problems, don't they? Jack was reading us this passage, and did you catch it? God said, "You are a holy people." Did you get that? Think about that for a moment. You are a holy people. I won't ask for a show of hands, because I know mine would only go up a little ways. But I'm comforted to know that that word does not mean perfect. We're not a perfect people. We're just a people living under the gift of grace. And wherever you look, you can see different shapes. And some days, I got to check the time. Okay. On some days, we look, and there's a grand mosaic of love, and we feel honored to be a part of the church. And other days, when we learn of some activities by some of the brethren, we're ashamed and embarrassed. But it's important to remember that we're not perfect, not by a long shot. When I was in Green Bay, Karen, who's not here today, she went to Chicago. Hi, Karen. She went to Chicago for the funeral of her brother-in-law this week, and then yesterday she hightailed it back to this little community where we live in the middle of dairy farm country. It's called New Holstein. Not because of the cows, because apparently in Germany there was a town called Holstein. Go figure. I think it's because of the cows. She's back there working in the bank this week, and one day she knows that I've been fascinated by this one particular tradition in the Christian church called the Anabaptists. The Anabaptists are the Amish, the Mennonites, and the Hutterites. And I've done a lot of reading and exploration. So one day I had to go up to the bank to meet with Karen about something. And walking out of the door came this Amish man. And I said to him, "Excuse me," and I introduced myself, and I said, "I'm so fascinated and interested in your tradition, your culture, and your religion. Would it be possible someday for me to come and attend worship with you?" He looked me up and down, and he said, "Well, it is all in German." And I said, "Oh, that might be a problem for me." So he said, "But if you'll give me your name and number, I'll have a friend of mine who is a Mennonite," that's Amish light, for those of you who don't know. "I'll have him give you a call, and perhaps you can go to his church, because it's all in English, but it's the same kind of tradition and theologies and so on." And I said, "That would be tremendous." Now, Amish don't have telephones, so he had to wait until Titus came back to see him a couple weeks later. Titus took my number and gave me a call. And he invited me to church. And he said, "Stay for dinner afterwards, too, with my wife, Sarah, and our children." And so I did. And I'm so glad. But I went to their service, worship service. Paula, it was 2.5 hours. just so you know. 2.5 hours. I got to check the time again. Okay. It was 2.5 hours, and the men were all dressed in black and white and short cropped hair and all of this, and the women were dressed in long dresses and bonnets. They sat on separate sides of the aisle, and I sat towards the back, and I noticed that not one time in 2.5 hours did anybody ever look across the aisle. And I got the strong impression that would have been breaking a very important law. So anyway, the service went on, and I was really getting into this. I'm thinking, boy, maybe this is it. Maybe I finally died and gone to heaven and found the right, perfect church. The singing was, only Chris would know. It was just beautiful. No instruments, a cappella. Everybody sang like you all sang the first song. And it was to die for. But halfway through the service, this man had to get up. He was a couple rows in front of me. His son, who looked to be about 9 years of age, remained in the pew. And this man got up and he went forward. And he was subject to public shunning. He had done something terrible and was about to receive his punishment for this, and he had to repent of this. Nancy, what he did is he had looked at a computer. Now, I'm not saying the stuff you're thinking. I'm saying he just looked at common news or something on this computer. And for that, he was shunned, and he was shamed in front of his young son. I was so uncomfortable. And I thought, okay, Lord, I get it. There's no perfect church. They're all full of people like you and me. And I thought, yeah, they have such an emphasis on righteous living. And I get that. Hey, look, it wouldn't hurt us to do something righteous once in a blue moon. But I realized that that's not my focus in life anymore. I'm not looking to be perfect like I used to, because I'm never going to make it. And I don't look for the perfect church anymore either. I just look to live under the gift of God's good grace and know that if it wasn't for that grace, I don't know that we would have anything at all. Oh, maybe there's a perfect church. I wouldn't put that on you. How we doing? Good check. 10:53. Okay. Chancel choir.